Alright, so let's talk about how the Provincial Nominee Program, or the PNP, plays into the Canadian immigration system. If you're someone interested in immigrating to Canada, you're going to want to pay attention, because 2 Canadian provinces recently opened up new rounds of invitations through this program. These provinces are British Columbia and Prince Edward Island. So, let's break down what all this means, why it matters, and what exactly went down in these provinces. First, let's start with a little background on the PNP itself, alright? The PNP is a program launched back in 1998. It actually started in Manitoba, of all places, because they wanted a way to spread the economic benefits of immigration throughout Canada. What happened was, most newcomers would usually head straight for the bigger cities like Toronto, Vancouver, or Montreal, right? Those are the names you always hear. And while they're great places, the Canadian government wanted to ensure other regions had a chance to grow too, which makes sense, yeah? So they started up the PNP, and now almost every province and territory has their own version of the program, except for Quebec and Nunavut. Quebec actually has its own unique system, so they don't need the PNP. What's interesting about the PNP is that it gives provinces a lot of flexibility in choosing immigrants. So, yeah, each province can select candidates who they think will be a great fit for their local economy. Basically, each province looks at the industries that are important to them, the skills that are in demand, and then chooses people who can contribute directly to their economy. Sounds pretty smart, doesn't it? And the federal government sets a limit on how many nominations can be issued each year through the Immigration Levels Plan. This means there's a cap on the number of people each province can nominate. Now, here's something you might want to note: the 2025 Immigration Levels Plan, which was released on October 24th, actually announced a major change. They've cut down the number of PNP nominations drastically for next year. Yeah, it's going from 110,000 in 2024 to just 55,000. That's quite a drop. What does this mean for people hoping to immigrate through this pathway? Well, competition is likely to increase, which makes those provincial nominations even more valuable, right? When a province nominates you, it's a big deal because it boosts your chances of getting permanent residence in Canada. And this is especially true if you're applying through express entry. If you get a provincial nomination, you're awarded an additional 600 points on your comprehensive ranking system CRS score. That's a massive boost. Essentially, it means that if you were on the lower end of the CRS score range, a nomination would push you right up to the top. So for express entry candidates, getting a provincial nomination is like finding the golden ticket. Okay, let's look at what happened in British Columbia between October 26th and November 1st. On October 30th, British Columbia held one of its draws and invited over 83 people to apply for a provincial nomination under the British Columbia Provincial Nominee Program, also known as the BCPNP. What they did was run a general draw, where they invited 31 candidates from a few specific streams: the skilled worker, international graduate, and entry-level and semi-skilled streams. Now, each of these streams has its own requirements, and candidates needed a minimum score to qualify. For most of them, the minimum score was set at 134. But if you were applying under the entry-level and semi-skilled category, you only needed a score of 117, so that's kind of a lower barrier. And that's not all. British Columbia also ran 4 additional draws which were more targeted. They were focused on certain occupations that the province really needs, which I find really smart. They're specifically looking for people who can fill critical roles, yeah? So here's what happened with those draws. They invited 20 candidates for childcare occupations, and they needed a minimum score of 90. Then, there were another 20 invitations for construction occupations, and the minimum score was 96 there. Healthcare, as you'd expect, was also a focus area. They invited 12 healthcare workers, who needed at least a score of 104. And finally, there was a small number of invitations for veterinary occupations. Fewer than 5 people were invited, and they only needed a minimum score of 80. So you can see, BC is being very strategic about it. They're not just inviting people randomly, they're looking for specific skills to meet specific needs. Moving on to Prince Edward Island, or PEI as it's often called, they had their own PNP draw as well. They invited 89 candidates under the Labour and Express Entry category. The cool thing here is that PEI has been focusing on industries where they have a lot of demand. So they looked for candidates already working in the province's healthcare, construction, and manufacturing sectors. This approach is really beneficial because it encourages immigrants to stay in PEI and contribute to the local economy right from the get-go. It also makes it easier for them to adapt, since they're already working in sectors that are essential to the province's economy. Interestingly, PEI also sent out 2 invitations for people in the business work permit entrepreneur category. These are people who plan to run businesses in the province, which, again, is very strategic. The minimum score required for these entrepreneurs was 92. Over the last year, PEI has actually been very active in terms of nominations. They've issued a total of 1,237 invitations, and the majority of these went to people in the labour and express entry streams, around 98%, in fact. So they're really prioritising workers who can make an immediate impact in the workforce. Now, if we take a step back and look at the bigger picture, the PNP is actually one of Canada's most popular economic immigration pathways. The reason is that it not only supports newcomers in getting permanent residence but also gives provinces the power to meet their own unique labour needs. I think it's fascinating how each province tailors its approach, right? Some prioritise high-demand occupations, others focus on attracting business entrepreneurs, and some, like PEI, are targeting people who are already working locally. This way, everyone benefits. Newcomers have a smoother transition, and provinces get skilled workers who contribute to their economies. But of course, with the number of PNP slots being cut next year, it's going to be even more competitive. People are going to need to be more strategic than ever. If you're thinking about applying through the PNP, it's crucial to research the specific needs and requirements of each province. You don't want to apply blindly, yeah? You'll want to match your skills to what the province is looking for. And as we saw with these recent draws, provinces sometimes focus on certain occupations, so keeping an eye on the latest updates can make a big difference in terms of timing your application. So that's the scoop on the recent PNP invitations in British Columbia and Prince Edward Island. It's clear that both provinces are using the program to their advantage by choosing candidates who are well suited to contribute to their specific economic landscapes. Whether you're looking to work in healthcare, construction, childcare, or even start a business, there are plenty of options, as long as you fit what the province needs. Alright, so if you're serious about moving to Canada and think the PNP might be a good route for you, be sure to stay updated on the latest changes and announcements. The PNP can be a game changer, especially if you get that 600-point boost through express entry.